everybody. Thanks for joining me here and thanks for checking out my podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell for new episodes. You can also find Shine Without Shame on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. My guest today is Sam Vaillancourt. Sam is currently an academic researcher in the lab of Boris Heifets at Stanford Medicine. In lab, he studies how MDMA, ketamine, and psilocybin can be harnessed as therapeutics for brain disorders like depression and PTSD. To do this, Sam seeks to understand the behavioral changes induced by the drugs, as well as the neurocircuitry that underlies this behavior. In his free time, Sam is passionate about science communication and making information about drug use and abuse accessible on a wider scale. Thank you so much, Sam, for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to speak. I think we'll have a great conversation.
Yes, I feel the same. And this is a topic or an area that I want to know more about, and it has become, I think over the years, has become just more mainstream in some conversations about drugs, drug use, but in the context of the larger context of healing or working through trauma or depression, anxiety, whatever it may be, but in the mental health well-being space. So more people are, I know, aware of drugs being used as therapeutics. And so I think for me, this will be enlightening to hear about your experience in, more of the lab side and in the treatments that
Yeah.
you've been connected to. But I also want to put this into the context of this podcast. I think I shared with you, I started this podcast a few years ago because I wanted to talk about the idea of shame and talk about it with the intention of promoting the idea that it's not really helpful in our lives. I think at
hmm
times, maybe in some extreme or egregious situations socially, people have committed, egregious crimes or done something that is affecting a lot of people negatively. Maybe shame can be a useful tool, but I think in general, shame just holds us down and keeps us back from living our lives with
Yeah.
joy, with happiness, feeling like we're living our lives as our best selves. So the idea of the podcast is one aspect is to promote the idea of removing shame and helping people to understand how it can get in our way from
hmm
moving forward, from being productive, from thriving,
Right, right,
and offering some tools, some resources from so many different perspectives and areas of study or just
right.
people sharing their personal experience with shame. So I think this will be so useful for a lot of people to understand more about the mental health aspect and how
Yeah, for sure.
from the clinical perspective, science
hmm
is exploring
Yeah,
drug
yeah.
use and as tools for healing. So first, I would love to hear about the work you're doing at Stanford and what led you to this path, like where
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
studies or in your personal life led you to
Yeah,
doing this work.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, first I just want to say, I find that the goals of your podcast very admirable. Shame, that's a tough one. And yeah, I hope that um some aspect of this will help people overcome very difficult mental states and conditions. And that's kind of been the goal of my, you know, young and burgeoning career so far in this space. Um, and yeah, so I grew up in New York City, and which is a very fast-paced environment and um, seems to kind of breed anxiety and mental health issues in a lot of people that I saw and interacted with. And so that was kind of my first exposure to like anxiety disorders and how exactly stress um, impacts the brain and kind of leads to other more serious things. And so with that in mind, I went to college. I went to UC Davis. I worked in the lab of David Olson. Um, and I studied neuroplasticity there and certain molecules that um, enable neuroplasticity to happen. And so neuroplasticity is the ability for the brain to make changes to itself, like the ability for the brain to be plastic, if you will, to adapt um, adapt to its surroundings, adapt to certain drugs. And so um, yeah, so I studied that there, and then that kind of helped me um, uh, propel into a kind of parallel field of study here at Stanford, which was less about neuroplasticity and more about like the behaviors and the neurocircuitry underlying these certain drugs that induce plasticity. So here at Stanford, I study MDMA and ketamine and psilocybin, and um, they each have very different effects. I'll say that. But yeah, they both do very different things for your brain. They have different changes. They're different brain states. And they're used as therapeutics for different conditions. And so a lot of what I do here is trying to understand how mechanistically they affect change in the brain and how that affects behavior on the drug. And then how the behavior in turn affects the mechanism. And then so back and forth. And so these are all in like preclinical models. And basic science in a lab bench with the aim of providing insight for clinical trials to test ideas in people, which is a lot more complicated and expensive. Um, but so once you can test it in people, you can see whether this idea checks out, and you can then go back to the bench and test more ideas and then bring that to people. So it's like it's a constant give and take. So yeah, so that's basically what I do here. I found it very eye-opening, a lot of like inner working things that I'm very shocked about, a lot of things I'm not so surprised about, but it's been extremely inspiring, and I predict a long career in this type of thing because I've been very happy to work here. I've been very happy to start projects and participate in other projects. Yeah.
Amazing. It's the work you're doing is imperative to, like you said, before the clinical trials start, because my understanding is the clinical trials, they're starting with a premise that or I don't know, hypothesis that
Mhm.
this drug is going to do this, but we want to test it out on people. Before you can even get to that stage, you have to understand the possibilities of the drugs. So you're
Right.
testing, I imagine, using mice or other uh,
Mhm.
s- species. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Would you just give a quick like 101 on those three different drugs and what right now
Oh
the
yeah.
understanding is for the connection
Yeah,
to the
sure.
brain and the influence?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess the one I work most closely with would be MDMA. And so I mean, MDMA has been around for a while. It's synthetic, so it's like created in a lab. Can't find it in nature. Or maybe you can in some very obscure place, but it's mostly synthetic. But yeah, so I mean, it's been known as like a party drug forever, but um, a lot of researchers have begun thinking about it in a different way, in that it's an amazing therapeutic. And one of the reasons why it's an amazing therapeutic for mental health conditions is this like empathy pro-social component that MDMA stimulates. And it's what people have found that it's very useful for things like psychotherapy, like talk therapy between a patient and a therapist or psychiatrist, because again, the pro-social component kind of allows you to build a closer relationship with that person who's trying to help you, which is kind of a major goal, at least I can say from personal experience, kind of the first major barrier to speaking with a mental health professional is just like learning how to open up, how they can help you, how you can communicate your ideas effectively to this person. Um, and then it's also kind of disinhibiting in that you're able to access certain things uh, from this MDMA experience that maybe you weren't able to access earlier. And so um, it's mostly used for to treat PTSD in the clinic. Um, and so yeah, so I mean it hasn't been FDA approved yet. There's a big thing in June. It's been used in clinic to treat PTSD. Um, and then the other one, ketamine. Ketamine has been around for a long time as well. Um, but it's historically had a more medicinal use. So it was first synthesized, you know, I think in the 50s, and um, it was used as like a battlefield anesthetic in wartime because it's, for single doses, it's very safe and efficient, and it gets the job done. When you use it, you can't. It's a great analgesic. You can't feel whatever it is the surgeon is trying to do to you on the battlefield. Um, and so it's had this journey from um, kind of a revolutionary therapeutic um, in the 1900s to now being scheduled and highly controlled, but still being used in operating rooms as an anesthetic. But now people are interested in, like MDMA, people are interested in its therapeutic efficacy for things like depression, as well as pain as well. But depression is what I focus on here in lab, specifically with ketamine. Um, and yeah, from what I can tell, it has enormous therapeutic potential. Um, it also has abuse liability, just like MDMA, so it's not, safe. Like, but yeah, ketamine has an enormous therapeutic potential, but it also has abuse liability. So it is important to, realize that and be careful about how it's being administered, how you're giving it. And so my project in lab was looking at ketamine's antidepressant effects, and how they may be mediated by the body's natural opioid system. So your body has natural opioids like endorphins or enkephalins, that make you happier. I guess most people would know endorphins for when you exercise. You have a massive endorphin release, you feel happier. It's the body's natural opioid system. So ketamine somehow harnesses this system to produce an antidepressant effect. So my project was looking at where exactly in the brain this is happening, which proteins, receptors are involved in this mechanism, because understanding the specific mechanism behind this can help inspire or produce um, similar therapeutic drugs that similar drugs to ketamine. Yeah, it can help inspire the production of other other rapid acting therapeutic drugs like ketamine, maybe without so much of the risk associated with it, like the subjective experience you get while tripping on ketamine. Um, and that's something that a lot of people are trying to study right now, is like taking the trip out of psychoactive drugs. And so
Hmm.
that's a whole other topic we could talk about later. But yeah. And then okay, the last thing you asked about was psilocybin. Um, yeah, so I mean, research into psilocybin has really kind of blossomed over the past 20 years, after being, shut down for the previous 20, 30 years before that for malpractice. And so now, I mean, tons of people are interested in psilocybin. What does it do? What can it help? Um, how can we help people with this super mystifying, mystical drug that, you know, works in some people, doesn't work in other people, gives some people terrifying experiences, gives some people euphoric experiences. Like, um, how exactly is this drug helpful? And there's not a lot of agreement on that right now. And so part of my project is like a multi-institutional consortium between Stanford, Berkeley, and University of San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco, UCSF, where we all do the same exact tests with psilocybin and trying to see whether we get the same thing. Are there threads of replicability? Are there certain findings that we find that are similar or the same that we can generalize? Because right now there's been a lot of disagreement over what exactly psilocybin is doing. Yeah, so I think I covered that. MDMA, ketamine, psilocybin. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, that helps just to kind of understand, a little bit of the influence that each of those drugs have, at least the understanding so far.
Yeah.
And to be clear, I mean, I've heard of a lot of people, you hear it in, in social context or in movies,
Mhm.
TV, you hear people talk about
Definitely.
psilocybin use.
Yes.
So that, whether it's legal or not, I
It's
I
becoming
I'm
legal.
assuming, yeah, I was like, I don't
Yeah.
know exactly where it is in that on that continuum, but I
Yeah.
so that is the drug that, or a drug that I know people dabble with, just on, like, not in a
Yeah.
clinic, not in a or not in a therapeutic setting.
Right.
But I think the other two are really, you're only going to find those in a more clinical therapeutic setting. Is that right? MDMA and ketamine, or are
Well,
people
so I mean,
experimenting with those,
yeah, they
on their
are.
own? Are they okay?
No, they definitely are. Yeah.
So
MDMA is like a rave party drug that people take. They go to concerts, drop some MDMA, because that
Molly, is that
exactly.
also
It's
what's referred
the
to?
other
Right.
street names are like Molly, Ecstasy, X. Um, Yeah, so they're definitely MDMA and ketamine specifically have been known for a while as party drugs, but are now being reconsidered or maybe considered by um, the medical community as maybe having some substantial therapeutic efficacy or value that I'm now looking into, as are countless other researchers across the country. Um, yeah, no, but they're, I mean, it's important to note that MDMA and ketamine definitely have abuse liability. While it may not be as addictive as something crazy like meth, they do have addictive liability, and it's important to know that. Um, and so my project with MDMA, as I said, was looking into its addictive liability and seeing how exactly that mechanism manifests. Maybe we can make it safer. Maybe we can make some other drugs that mimic the good parts of MDMA, and maybe not the addictive nature. So yeah, there are all sorts of interesting things to pull out of that. Yeah,
Right. Okay. That's what I wanted to elaborate on, was
yeah,
making
yeah,
clear when you were talking, you were referencing people using it outside of a clinical therapeutic setting when you were talking
yeah,
about addictive liability. When so I want to just make that clear for people who don't know
yeah.
much or haven't
Good
heard
point.
about these drugs. Like MDMA I've heard of, but I was forgetting that Molly and ecstasy is the street name, or the street
Yeah,
names,
yeah,
if you
yeah.
will. So
Right.
yeah, this is so uh, when people, to your knowledge, when people just,
Mhm.
everyday people are using these drugs, again, not in any sort of therapeutic clinical setting, and some people are just definitely have been using them as party drugs. But is there a shift now where people are trying to, like, on their own, utilize these for, like, consciously, intentionally trying to utilize them for
Oh,
therapeutic benefits? Like, is that
yeah.
becoming, to your knowledge, like
That's a great question.
an awareness, or like a desire, or are these
Yeah.
still just all kind of like, I want to, like, trip and party with these drugs
No, yeah,
primarily?
that's a great question. I mean, to my knowledge, I mean, there's a lot of hype surrounding them in that, oh, maybe they can be used for this and that, and maybe they're not as horrible as we once thought. But in terms of, people taking it upon themselves to do therapy with these drugs, not clinically supervised, first of all, I would highly discourage that. And second of all, I really don't know. I don't feel like I'm in the community that would, dabble in that. What I know is, what I study in lab, and so the few people that I come across that I've talked to about this, um, that is a great question. I think it really varies by case. Again, I would have to, strongly discourage that. Talk to your doctor, of course.
Yes.
Um, But that's a great question. There are a lot of people who are seeking this treatment. I don't think MDMA treatment is like broadly available. I don't think it's been approved yet. But that's coming in the next in the next chapter of MDMA research is how can we get this to clinic? And there have been some roadblocks. Hopefully there people are the specific people are working on overcoming those roadblocks. But ketamine is a different story. It has been MDMA approved. You can find it in, clinics. I'm pretty sure you can like mail order it to your house and there, eye shades and tapes and,
Hmm.
relaxation tapes. You can do it at home while on a call with your therapist type thing. They can
Oh,
watch you take it. So that is more broadly accessible right now. Obviously, again, talk to your doctor,
that's right.
um, don't take what I say at face value, but um, yeah, no, I mean, there's been a blossoming of interest, and I hope that that has not carried over into, you know, people taking it upon themselves to,
Mhm.
buy these drugs illegally and consume them for therapeutic value. But yeah, I mean,
Right. I mean, I think that recently there was a celebrity that was very well known who unfortunately passed away recently,
mm,
where I think there was a story about uh, they were using ketamine with a therapist, in a therapeutic
right.
setting, and then it has been discovered that they also were going outside of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
context, right? So I
yeah.
think this is becoming something that people are, I mean, there's always so many unique factors for each person
Right.
who's wanting to heal and maybe even has an addiction or addictive
Yeah,
history. So it's complex. I'm
right.
certainly not trying to address every aspect of it, but it seems to me that there is becoming this, just from what I hear of people talking, podcasts, interviews,
Hmm.
conversations out in the world, that people are starting to explore drugs
Yes.
for dealing with their depression or dealing with their anxiety. Like they want to address those
Okay.
problems in their
Yeah.
lives, but they are taking it upon themselves, maybe in some cases,
Hmm.
to utilize these drugs, personally on their own without maybe always having guidance. Maybe some people do have guidance,
Yeah.
like informally. So I'm only asking because I'm curious, and that's why I wanted to know what you
Yeah.
were knowing about
Yeah.
this
Again, speak
sort
to
of
your doctor.
social. No, exactly. So I want to be clear.
Yeah.
I'm not promoting people go on their own and
Yeah, no, of course, of
explore these
course.
drugs. I was just trying to understand what is the trend,
Yeah.
what are socially people
Yeah.
seeking, are people
You know,
trying to
trends among young
explore,
people.
and it's outside of
Uh,
just partying with drugs, but are
right,
are
right.
people trying to explore drug use more prevalently for dealing with mental health issues, or
Yeah.
just personal challenges and trauma that they're trying to work through.
Yeah.
It seems like this is becoming something people are wanting to explore, and if they don't have access to a clinical trial or a therapist, um, that they are trying to find ways, and being creative. But to your
Right.
point, I agree with you. I think that these drugs can be so powerful, and I'm sure can have also many side effects, that it just seems wise to want
Yeah.
uh to advise people to, work with the doctor, speak to their doctor.
Right.
But I
Right. Right.
think what I'm also getting at, Sam, is like there seems to be people are wanting to find ways to
Yeah.
heal,
There's
and they're
definitely a
trying to
huge
like
interest. Yeah.
get creative with that. So
Yeah.
I was just wondering what your take was on if there was a trend you were noticing in that respect.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, no, I
that's
mean, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. People are like really, really interested in this brand new, sexy therapeutic that can maybe solve all of their problems. But I think it's also what you were just saying reminded me as well that my from my perspective, I don't feel that there's a silver bullet that will, just kind of cure your psychiatric disease or mental health. Um, I don't think there's just like one drug that you can just take and it'll all get better. I think that is kind of going to be really, really hard to do in lab is like find a magic cure. Whereas the answer is probably more, this drug will help you do things that improve your mental health. Like it will help you speak to a therapist. It will help you want to go outside. It will help you want to be, or it may help you be less lethargic. It may improve your motivation to want to exercise or eat better, stuff like that. I don't know that it will have like a direct effect, although, I mean, antidepressant effects from ketamine are usually pretty rapid. Um, but in terms of like long-lasting change, I don't think there's a silver bullet. And just, taking a drug is it may help you in the short term, but I don't think it, solves any long-term problems. I think that's something else to, really be aware of is these are, these are heavy drugs. They're used, mostly under supervision, and they're not silver bullets. They're, interesting tools that we can study and information from to help develop safer ways to take them or new drugs that mimic the good qualities and maybe not the bad qualities. Yeah, I think right now they're just amazing tools to study. And the next few years, the next 20 years, we'll see a lot of new exciting research and how exactly we can use it, different applications. Um, so I'm very excited for that. I'm excited to be part of it. Like as I progress in this career, I'm very excited to see what happens from my research of my peers, research from this lab, other labs. This is a great time to be studying psychedelic science. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it seems like it is. I appreciate that idea, and that's what I wanted to hopefully get
Yeah,
to, encouraging the idea that, there isn't a silver bullet. This is potentially one of many tools people can access, or, eventually maybe
yeah,
we'll be able to access in more numbers to help move them along in ways that allow them to thrive, allow them to heal from, painful experiences, emotionally uh, painful or traumatic experiences.
right,
Or maybe it's for some people, like it's just a part of their makeup in terms of the way their brain chemistry works. And maybe they are, tend toward depression more than someone else. I mean, there's so many different areas and factors to
right.
consider when it comes to people's health and their healing journey. So, yes, that's where I wanted the conversation to go. So I'm glad we're going there. And I just wanted to explore a little bit of what socially what is trending right now with how people are becoming aware about these drugs and
Hmm.
how they're potentially
Yeah,
exploring them, or uh, learning
right.
about them. So I think this is a good place to also talk about the lifestyle choices and lifestyle uh yeah uh, behaviors that people can consider, or probably many people have
Yeah,
already considered. But you started to talk about the idea of, diet
right,
and
right.
exercise. And I know you've also talked
Yeah,
about socializing when we were
right, right, right.
exploring, talking about this
Yeah,
topic. So
yeah, it's true.
share what
Um,
also you
yeah,
think
sure.
about lifestyle choices for
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
on their journey.
I mean, I'll preface this by saying, I'm not a nutrition biologist or an exercise biologist or, but
Sure.
I can just tell from my own personal experience that, the three things that I really need are, I need to eat well, I need to exercise, and I need to be social. And I've noticed in myself when I do those three things that I feel a lot better. Feel like I have more energy. I feel less lethargic. I feel like I'm, somewhat invincible, which, is maybe good or bad, but I feel like I have more confidence in my personal life and in lab to, think about ideas, get things done. And this is something that I will definitely recommend, eating well, getting exercise and being social from my personal experience. Um, yeah, no, I think they're, extremely important. Um, and
I think science also has been looking at those aspects as well, right? I mean, it's the
Yeah,
idea of your diet and your ability to connect with people,
right.
and to move your body, all of those seem to influence health, and that's been studied for a long time. So I think it's great to hear from you that personally that those aspects of health have
Yeah,
influenced your life positively. And it seems like
absolutely.
it's already also been explored by science, and I don't think
Right.
people can refute that these are areas that are,
Yeah,
they're not just things that sound great and okay, yeah, eat well,
yeah, yeah.
and
No, it's true.
they're truly influential on the body and on the
Right.
mind.
I guess I will say that, having been through, depression and anxiety as well, it is like just so much harder. Like, even if you know that you need these three things in order to feel good, like, it's just so much harder to motivate yourself to do them when you're kind of in the throes of dealing with things, when you're, not like where you could be. And like, I don't know any other advice than to just like force myself to do them. It's just so like when you're when you're depressed, you don't want to do any of these things. You almost want to get worse. And it's just so hard to claw yourself back, bring yourself out of it, do things you know will help you, when that's not really what you want to do at all. And when I do that, I do notice myself feeling a little bit better, being like, okay, maybe I do want to feel better. Oh, this is actually working. Maybe I should maybe I should do this more often. And then usually like some kind of event to inspire confidence will really just bring me fully back. Um, but yeah, no, I've definitely noticed that. Like, diet, exercise, and being social, and having, constructive social interactions, building relationships, that type of thing is just so useful to your brain health. Um, and I'm sure it's backed up in literature, but, you can check that out.
Yeah, the
Um,
doing of it
yeah.
is, like you said, the doing of it, I think people will appreciate that point, can
Yeah.
be the hardest part.
Oh,
Even if
absolutely.
you intellectually know, okay, this is important.
Right.
This I know people say this will change my life, and I understand intellectually how that can be true, but like you said, the having the motivation, that's so hard when you already aren't
Right.
feeling naturally
Yeah.
motivated. And I'll add that I think this is where having support can be
Oh,
helpful.
yes. Right.
Maybe you've experienced that. I know I have.
Yeah.
When there's something I need to work through, whether it's somebody who's a professional, in the area of mental health or coaching, or some aspect of self-help, personal development work,
Hmm.
I think it can be useful to access professionals, but I don't think that's the only path.
Yeah.
I think that we can have friends in our lives, family members, even coworkers, who we trust,
Yeah,
who can
absolutely.
help us, support us. Maybe they join us in
Hmm.
some exercise, or maybe we find two or three people who know us, well enough to know that we're struggling, we're not feeling our best, whatever that looks like for each person. And
Hmm.
we find ways to socialize that like work for like
Hmm.
us, but then also the people who are supporting us, some simple socializing. It doesn't have to be anything major. It can be going to coffee or going on a walk and, talking. But I think having
Yeah.
that support system is critical. Again, whether it's a professional, mental health, life coach, whatever kind of professional that or a therapist that you have access to. But even if you don't have access right now to
Yeah.
those resources, just finding people who can
No, I
help support
completely
you,
agree.
and I think
Yeah.
also sometimes can help you be accountable, not like in a authoritarian kind of oppressive way, like did you do your walk, no, but
No,
just
no, they just
who
check
can
in,
check
show you
in.
care, stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. That I think is tremendous value. I know
Hmm.
it's been for me in my life when I've struggled in areas where I've needed to, move forward, but just felt like it was going to be a little challenging, to put one
Yeah.
foot in front of another
Yeah. Sometimes
every
it's just
day. It's like,
the next
oh,
foot is just like, well, do I have to? Like, can I not?
yeah,
But then like at a certain point you're just like, no, I need the next foot. I need it. And then I need the next one
exactly.
after that, and I need the next one after that, and let's just keep this going. And so
Exactly.
like just
I think
motivating yourself to do this is one of the hardest things.
yes.
And anything like it's easy for me to say these three things are necessary: diet, exercise, and sociability. But finding the specific mechanisms within yourself, finding your own strategies for how to get you to do these things is something that I really recommend because it's different for everyone.
Hmm.
Motivation is different. How can you get yourself to do the things that you know will make you feel better? Is a very complex question. And I think that I'm like starting to understand what exactly that is for me, but it has not been easy and it will not be easy. It's just kind of being a little bit observational, taking kind of a clinical approach to my life, looking at it through, you know, uh, kind of an analytic lens, being like, well, this works, this really doesn't. I should do this, I should not do that, um, to get myself to this state. And so, yeah, I mean, how to help yourself feel better is so hard, so complex, but it's very, very, very doable. And it just takes some motivation, some, drive to see certain results in yourself, which again is very hard when you're just, not in the state to be motivated to do that. But hopefully slowly you can kind of be able to put yourself out. Yeah. I
Yes.
hope I hope this is useful for some people. But
I think
there's
so. I think hearing us talk about,
yeah.
I hope so, but I think that hearing us talk about the scientific side of things, or
Hmm.
the work you're doing and studying how these drugs can be useful, uh, but knowing that they're not really accessible, at least not in
Mm.
the therapeutic realm, they're not really accessible to
Yeah.
loads of people yet,
Talk to your
then
doctors. Yes.
of course, but
Yeah, yeah, sorry. Kidding.
knowing that that isn't something that a lot of people are going to be accessing, well,
Yeah.
now we're talking about ways that people can definitely improve their lives and change
Hmm.
their lives through what they're doing day to day in their lives, through the
Right.
foods they're putting into their body, putting in foods that actually nourish their body. That doesn't mean it has to be
Yeah.
like quote unquote healthy, that kind of healthy food that doesn't isn't fun to eat. There's so many foods that are fun to eat that
Yeah.
are also going to be nourishing. So that's the those are the dots I'm connecting. I'm not at
Yeah.
all saying if you can't access these drugs, go find a way on your own. No, that's not what I'm promoting. I want to be clear. I'm saying since
Yeah.
these drugs aren't accessible in a therapeutic setting,
Hmm.
with supervision, as we've been talking about, then what I'm proposing that we can still find tools and resources that are going to affect our bodies and our
Yeah,
minds.
absolutely. It's just kind of hard to try and find them, but they
Well,
are there, they're
it's,
available. It's
oh
just,
yeah, I think there's so
yeah.
many more ways to access resources that are potentially useful and hopefully are trustworthy.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be, I don't think like the latest, you know, diet fad or craze has to be what we
Yeah.
turn toward.
See,
I think it
those
can
kind of
just be
go in and
going
out.
back
I don't know.
to, yeah, I think it can just be going back to some of the basics of, okay, what foods do I know
Yeah.
that are meant to be nourishing to the body, and then getting maybe creative, maybe finding a friend, a loved one who wants to make a meal together, wants to every week get together
Yeah.
one day a week, and let's get creative. Let's make food together that we know is beneficial. You don't have to be a nutritionist necessarily. Of
Yeah.
course, access a nutritionist if you can, but you don't have to be a nutritionist to learn about which foods are going to be
No, I
beneficial.
know.
And maybe people can get together once a week and be creative and make a meal together that's nourishing, that
Absolutely.
tastes good. They're
Hmm.
socializing, right? I mean, there's so many ways to be creative and
Yeah,
to get what we
absolutely.
need, and it doesn't have to really cost much.
Hmm.
So it can be easily accessed. Exercising, you don't have to have a gym membership. I mean, that can be something that, like, again, you can go on walks with
Yeah.
friends. You can go out and ride
Yeah.
bikes, or
Grab
you
a pair
can
of running shoes, go through the neighborhood, you know.
move. And yeah, I think that, and all of that, again, maybe cooking with friends, moving, doing movement or exercise with friends, that all incorporates also socializing. I mean,
Of
that's
course.
a way you can be efficient because I know
Honestly,
everybody's
anytime
busy.